Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Call It RevOps, and today we're talking about customer journey mapping, and the reality of it is that it's a PowerPoint fairy tale. A lot of times when we map out these customer journeys or dive into what's going to be presented to leadership, we have this beautiful, picturesque idea in our mind, but the reality is the real use case and the real journey is always much, much different. So we wanted to take some time, dive into RevOps, and cut out the nonsense and talk about what customer mapping is really like. And I think, Raja, you have some pretty strong feelings on this, I know,
No, I
just from
do.
my
I do.
experience.
Yeah. Well, I've done a lot of customer journey mapping exercises. And I will tell you one of the things that is the most typical behavior when you do customer journey mapping is that people spend more time on creating scenarios in the customer journey that will never happen in real life. And
Yep.
it's almost like a fairy tale. It's a made up thing that you expect people to do or engage with your brand. Like no buyer is sitting there saying, "Oh, I downloaded an ebook. I wonder if I'm in the consideration stage. How much are they scoring? Did I get 2 points? Did I get 3 points? Like
Yeah.
when are they going to reach out to me?" Like that doesn't happen, right? Like we love the idea of a linear path, like the linear path with branches top and bottom and recycles and loop de loops and all of this other stuff, and it's nicely neatly packaged, and every buyer does not care whatsoever, because anytime you report on it there's jumps. And you know why there's jumps? Because there's not that they're not following your path, it's just your customer journey is wrong. And that's not how people follow. We were actually just talking about, we've been redesigning our website at GNW for a while. Why? Because we looked at Hotjar and we looked at these analytics and these tools where people are just scrolling up and down, clicking on every single thing. That's not normal behavior, but that is the behavior of people trying to look at the website. Oh, what is this cool thing? What is that cool thing? No one is coming and saying, "I'm going to click on this. Now I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click on this. And let me scroll and read all this content," right?
hmm
We love the idea of it in marketing, right? But as in RevOps, very specifically, the sole reason, I wouldn't say the sole reason, sorry, but the reason RevOps as a title, as a role, has kind of sped up to market is to really cut through that nonsense of, hey, are more are aren't just most journey maps just overcomplicated sales funnels? Like, is someone actually doing this? And that's the truth, right? Buyers don't follow scripts. No one follows a script. No one follows your script. Uh, if you have the same customer journey at the beginning of the year that you have at the end of the first quarter, then your customer journey, just like your lead scoring model or anything, is probably obsolete because things change and things change. The buyer journey changes, right? All the time. It is not consistent. It's not something that you can track. Well, there's elements of it, sorry. There's elements of that you can track, but there's buying behavior and intent to buy that you cannot. And that's the part that makes it the toughest when you have the same journey that you did probably maybe 2 years ago in a session with one of us somewhere. And that's the one has been stapled on a wall saying, "This is what our customers are doing." No, the reality is journeys change, people change, intent signals change, technologies change.
Yeah, it's really kind of if I was thinking of a parallel, it's kind of like planning a wedding without any input from the bride, right? You're trying to create this perfect scenario and choose the colors and do all this stuff, but there's no input from the person that's actually a part of it. Marketing wants the buyer journey to be linear, predictable, and for a lot of reasons, that's really going to tie into why marketing is aiming for that. But that is totally not going to happen. It is going to be a failure in the real world if you approach it in that way.
Yeah. And really it's an internal exercise. Like, just to be honest, like when people come to a company and you say, "What is the product that we're selling? What is the service we're offering?" It's an internal exercise to get people on the same page. Is this is what we want our customers to do. But however, it's always, are customers doing these? Let's fit them into the stages. As an internal exercise, there's not a problem with it. You can create whatever scenario that you want people to follow, but the reality is that's not, like, you're not in control. Like, the buyer is in control of what they're doing, how they're acting. You are influencing decisions on their journey, not your journey. And that's the biggest disconnect. And that's the biggest thing that people generally don't understand, is that The buyer is what's controlling it. The market is what's controlling it. The what's going on, world events are what's controlling it, right? And you can't plan for those. You have an ideal path, but that's all it is. And that's why I say it's a fairy tale. This is the thing that we want people to do, ideally, but it never really happens like a good 70 to 80% of the time.
And there's kind of this idea of getting into a room, and hopefully you're doing this with more than just one team, but getting into a room and mapping out the perfect scenario, the ideal scenario. There might be, and this kind of ties into what companies should focus on instead, but there might be a lot more value in saying, how do we remove friction from each one of these stages rather than baking in an expectation that they're going to behave a certain way. But with that in mind, I mean, when we think about customer journey mapping, we have to do it. There has to be some kind of model that we can reference. There has to be some sort of idea. How should we focus on what should we be doing instead, or companies should be doing instead?
But that's the thing, right? Like just like you pointed out, that as soon as one thing off of that path breaks, the whole system breaks, right? That's why when people talk about like we don't really have really good conversion reporting, or our reportings are all over the place, it's because you're trying to fit every single thing into this ideal path, when realistically we should be removing the walls for the person to go from one to the other and have information available. So it's kind of like an old school Goosebump book, right? Like choose your own adventure. Do they want to go to page 23 or 55? Do you want to go to 73? Make those options available, and then the result the result will then kind of like reveal itself as like that. Oh, that's what this person was trying to get to.
Yeah, who's showing interest? How are they interacting with the content in a meaningful way? And what signals tell us that they're ready to buy? And I think there's probably three sort of steps that we could anticipate. And you could dive more into this, but it's tracking that buyer signal, creating that relevant content that's going to be easy to find so we could find out what they're engaging with, and then making that process a little bit more seamless. But realistically, all journeys should kind of adhere to those general principles when it comes right down to it.
And I think that's the key point that you kind of mentioned. Like, we need to create fewer roadblocks, and we need to make information accessible easier. The reality is, vanity metrics used to be open end clicks. We've talked about impression data and stuff like that. But content downloads are not intent to buy unless it's a pricing handbook or something. Like, it has to be a clear indicator of intent to move forward. An ebook, a white paper is kind of like the modern day version of opening and clicking a link in an email when marketing automation and tech kind of came out, right? It is a good signal, but it doesn't mean that it's really someone's going to buy it.
It's almost kind of like we've seen more and more companies even remove gating the content, right?
Yeah.
They don't even create a gate for you to access it. They're just like, take it.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, like you have to remove the roadblocks. Like, and when we talk about removing like these barriers of entry, and that's why the whole no gated piece, because people don't care. Like, the content that you have, if you're going to put a gate on it, should be so good. It should be so valuable that a person is willing to give you their information. And honestly, in modern day world, you probably already have all their information. People invest a lot into platforms that kind of enrich data nowadays, just in general. Anyway, so like, what are you gating it for? You're creating a blocker for someone to move forward with maybe just some research that they were kind of doing. You have to make this buying process seamless. You have to make information available, because that is just the world that we live in today. So
Yeah, I think there was a statement that we pulled out of this, that the prettiest journey maps are the ones that actually listen to what their buyers are doing. So, it won't be this incredibly advanced sort of Miro board with branching logic all the time. Sometimes it'll look a little bit messy, but if it's the effective, true, actual life cycle of the buyer, that's going to be the best one. That's what leadership needs to see. That's what your teams need to focus on. So if we back up a little bit, what should we do without a journey map? How do we adapt to this idea of saying, okay, we're going to scrap our perfect picturesque idea. Let's get down to what really is going to make a difference.
Let's clarify one thing, right? That picturesque fantasy journey map, once again, for internal reasons is good. Somewhere along the way, you have to develop what the baseline is. What we're really saying here is that we have to stay agile inside the buyer engagement, knowing that people are not going to stick to it. That's the hard part, because when we measure everything from a left to right model or an up and down or whatever it is, or a trash to recycle, when we measure everything on that customer journey map and it doesn't go planned, that's where questions like why, well, what's going on? Why are all these deals stalled? Well, let's talk about deal acceleration. Why are all these deals stalled? Let's talk about tracking real engagement.
And as we're talking through this, like how do we set up a journey map that makes sense? I'm reminded of someone who came to our booth at Adobe Summit. They came over and literally we were what they were looking for, and they had been watching us kind of from the sidelines.
Yeah, and the funny thing, that's exactly what we're talking about in this segment, right? Um, she did all the research on her own. Only thing that we did was we didn't make it a blocker for her to get information that she needed. Now, she had no what we would classify as any kind of signals, realistically speaking. You would maybe attend a webinar, maybe she'd drop off, maybe. And when we looked back at it, it was not even email engagements, it's not even impressions or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was one thing that we did 2 weeks before we went to Adobe Summit that just stuck. It
Mm-hmm.
resonated with her. She came and she talked to us, and that is how. But she had, after looking at her kind of data, because that's what we do, right? Like we want to look at, hey, what is she on? It? There was no clear intent signal. There was no clear
Mm-hmm.
indication that she would be on any part of any journey map that we would have ever built.
Well, and even with that in mind, when she came over and talked to us, it wasn't about the thing that she had seen 2 weeks before Adobe Summit. It was about something totally different, but that buyer journey was tied in from that standpoint. So it was really cool. We got a meeting on the books. We were able to talk with her, and it just reminded me a little bit about this journey map, because there's no expectation that this person who's a great fit that we found out for us would have followed this rigid structure that we have on, all right, you're going to be scored this much, you're going to be doing this much, you're going to be doing this much, and no intent signal was actually flagged out of it.
So when we get asked a question like, well, what should we be tracking if it's not a journey map, right? It's engagement, it's intent. And when we think about conferences very specifically, when we were at Adobe Summit, there were people that maybe had done one thing that resonated with them enough to where they came and sought us out. They talked to us. We had conversations. That conversation resulted from us removing all barriers of entry of content that we provide. Podcasts such as this, what we have on the website, our content that we have, they digested all of that information. They digested it across multiple emails, sometimes even in incognito mode because we're in the tech space, we're marketing operations people. And what I'm trying to kind of say is that there's actions that we can track and there's other actions that we cannot. And when we talk about journey mapping, they would fit at the very beginning. By the time they came and talked to us, they already knew, they already knew who we were.
Well, and even on that journey too, Raj, if I'm not mistaken, some people came over and had attended other sessions from other vendors that you were just a guest speaker at, and we didn't have any access to that data, but it resonated with them. And while that's a gap in the journey, it's still a part of their journey.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about. Like we need to stop obsessing over tracking every single touch point, and we really need to focus on what actually is influencing people to have conversations. I don't even want to say the word deal or opportunity, but just what is influencing people to start having conversations. And when we talk about brand, to Akande's point, just a normal, like something that you never thought of, someone invited you to a guest podcast or whatever, or whatever it may be, you have a conversation with it. That brand is something that I brought with it, what Akande brings with it, and it just resonated. There's no tracking to that. Like it's not our information. Are we gonna get that information from someone and start emailing them and start really hunkering down on it? Like the most that they're gonna get is a follow up email, right?
Yeah.
Like let's just be real. But if you did get that information and start just hammering home the message over and over again, you might potentially maybe even lose that deal, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so much influx of data and marketing. It's really, when we talk about journey mapping in 2025, we're talking about a journey that a person is on, and you as a company are there to make sure that they're getting information, the least resistance to get the information that they need, and let them make a decision. And if your brand is strong and it's meaningful and it's impactful, they will reach you out. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. So as we kind of, tidy this up in a little bow for people to take away something actionable, what are like the three things that people should be focusing on instead of creating this perfect path, perfect journey map scenario?
I mean, I definitely want to. We definitely talk about this a lot, but ditch the perfect path thinking. Right?
Hmm.
There's even every intent to buy, every intent signal differs person to person, time to time. Marketing is 24/7 at this point. Sometimes it feels like, right? It's when people are digesting content. It's when people are engaging with your brand. Build marketing that kind of makes sense. Like, where would a buyer jump in? What are the points? If someone's already done all the research, what's the next point that they should be jumping to? And that is a jump, right? Like, if you think
Hmm.
about a conventional buyer journey, when you say all these people are jumping from like engage to all of a sudden to SAO, they're not jumping. That's where they started, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
just you're just putting them into the engage bucket, and now you're saying, oh, they're moving into MQL or sales accepted. No, that's where they started because they already did all of that work on their own prior to even moving. So if someone starts at at your journey that you've designed at a different point, that's their start. It's not a
Yeah.
jump, that's their start. And that's what I think we need to really start obsessing over just in general.
Yeah, what's unique about that from an agency model, we consult with a bunch of different companies using a lot of different technologies. It would be really weird if somebody attended one of our highly tactical, in the weeds type webinars, and then we email them and say, hey, have you considered this technology that you've had for 5 years? Here's the cool things that it could do. You could personalize an email send. Like, what? I know all this stuff. I need to figure out how to use velocity scripting, right? That's a totally different start to their journey than someone who's maybe evaluating a solution.
At the end of the day, the modern day buyer journey, which is a very coined term, because if you Google modern day buyer journey, you'll have 50,000 blogs about it, is not a journey at all.
Yeah.
It is the path of least resistance that us as companies can can control. Our job is to control and remove any kind of barrier or friction that people might incur while they're on that journey themselves. And it will vary person to person to person.
Absolutely. I would love at some point for us to have a conversation with other folks in this space and kind of ask them that same question. Is it a fairy tale or is it a real thing? I think that people would probably agree, but of course, that's what Call It RevOps is all about. And thank you guys for tuning on this episode. Be sure to check out our future episodes as we dive into other RevOps topic and check out our ones in the past. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you next time.